Minister, I remember, like many of us, on the night in February 2022 when we woke up in the morning and Russia had invaded Ukraine, and everyone thought for that first couple of days, that first week, what's going to happen? They're going to roll over them very quickly. But it proved otherwise, and it's certainly a tribute to the resilience and the courage of the Ukrainian people that they have withstood for so long, that they have held up against what would always have been considered a huge military power, a huge global military power, and they have been able to fight back and hold the line. And of course they have done that with the support of many, and none more so than indeed the people of Ireland, who welcomed thousands and thousands of Ukrainians that came here. And I remember that first number of weeks. I'm sure many of us worked with people we knew who were from Ukraine, or people we got to know who were from Ukraine, to help to bring families here and to find places for them to stay and to accommodate them and work with them. And many of those people have become parts of the communities in different parts of the country, and have been a huge asset to those communities. And indeed, many of them that I've got to know have told horrific stories of things that happened, to their families back home. There's one man that I know from my own community who told me of his sister being killed in the very early days of the war, and indeed since then 3 more of his extended family have died, and they were all civilians. And that's one of the things about conflicts like this, is that the people who really suffer at the core of it are usually the civilian population, and that has been very much the case in this brutal aggression that Russia has extended across its neighbour. Of course, Vladimir Putin is basically a fascist dictator that is trying to expand his power and grow his influence, and he has to be stood up against, and that's clearly what has to happen. And unfortunately, with the change in regime in the United States, we don't see as steadfast a line being drawn there, and certainly we see that much of the negotiations, and we had Alaska and we had all of these places where there was supposed to be a new dawn and there was supposed to be peace coming, and it hasn't come. And it hasn't come because ultimately, at the end of the day, Putin does not want peace. Putin wants to continue the war, and unless you have a situation where the aggressor is prepared to accept that they have to stop, and they have to retreat, and they have to go back to the negotiating table, the war will continue. And that has been the tragedy for so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine. Indeed, as I was often thinking about it, if we took the hundreds of billions that has been spent in the war industry in that Ukrainian war alone, and that were spent on health services or on any other thing which is positive for humanity, what a difference it would make. But unfortunately, in so many places in the world, we had the genocide in Gaza as well. We have genocide also, of course, in Sudan, which is continuing and ongoing. And those issues are feeding an industry which is making huge profits from it. And that link isn't pointed out often enough, and I think we need to be firm on that as well, and recognise that there are vested interests here at play who do not want war to stop. They want war to continue, and very often to the tragedy of so many people. As I said, the Irish people have played their role, and very many families have opened their hearts and their homes to people from Ukraine, and they have been enriched themselves by the experience of having those Ukrainian families who come and live with them and have been part of our communities. And that welcome and that extension of that welcome has to continue and must continue. And sometimes I hear in some of our communities a backlash, and people with all sorts of negative comments been made about people from Ukraine or people from other countries coming here. And I think we have to be very conscious that only this week there was a man convicted in the courts of the murder of somebody simply because he thought that person didn't speak English. And that tells us that we have a huge problem boiling under the surface in this country that we have to address, a problem of racism and Islamophobia and all of those issues. I think is something that we cannot avoid. While we have people coming here fleeing conflict, fleeing situations where they would have their human rights denied, and we welcome them and want to give them a space in our country, and they will enrich our country, we also have to recognise that there are people who have a very negative agenda, and that too has to be held against and fought against. The Irish people stand wholeheartedly with the people of Ukraine against the aggression of Russia. And of course, we want to see peace come about. And we all know that the only way peace can come about is, first of all, if the aggressor accepts that peace has to happen, and it's certainly the view, I think, of most people that until Vladimir Putin feels strong economic pressure, and that economic pressure has to come from all of the countries, not just in Europe but around the globe. And that means that they have to stop buying the oil from them. They have to exert maximum sanctions on Russia to ensure that we can bring them to heel and bring them to the negotiating table and sit down and work out a settlement which will give Ukraine back its territory, which will ensure that we have got a full and final peace settlement. And there cannot be a settlement if the representatives of the Ukrainian people are outside the door. They have to be part of that settlement. And that's absolutely vital. So, Minister, I'm glad to be here to address this issue. And I think ultimately the Irish people are very clear that they want to see peace everywhere in the world, and they certainly want to see people in Ukraine, and they want to see that the many friends that they have made who have come here from Ukraine can have a happy and peaceful place to go back to.